The pre-dawn chill of October 3rd, 2025, over eastern Ukraine's Pavlo-Oblast, concealed a chilling intent. Just 40 miles from the Russian border, a tempest of steel and fire was brewing, the largest aerial assault of the year. 35 precision Condor ballistic missiles, augmented by a relentless swarm of 60 drones, screamed through the night sky, their trajectories locked onto a single, vital target, a critical gas hub. Their mission was brutally clear: to plunge Ukraine into the depths of a freezing winter, breaking its will through the cold. But a profound secret shimmered beneath the surface of this devastating attack, a twist of fate Russia was utterly blind to. The target wasn't what it seemed. It was a phantom, an elaborate, $500,000 masterpiece of strategic deception. Towering inflatable structures meticulously mimicked the exact silhouette of a vast compressor station, while hidden, potent heat emitters blazed at an astonishing 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This wasn't merely a decoy. It was an irresistible beacon, radiating a thermal signature so perfect, so compelling, that Russia's own advanced missile guidance systems were inexorably drawing their payloads towards an illusion, towards their own undoing. Meanwhile, a mere 7 miles away, the genuine $2 billion facility, the very heart of Ukraine's winter survival, lay utterly invisible, nestled beneath a shroud of cutting-edge adaptive camouflage, completely unmolested. This raises a crucial, terrifying question. Why would Ukraine permit $200 million worth of enemy ordnance to draw so perilously close? The answer lay not in merely surviving the initial punch, but in a far bolder ambition: to leverage Russia's own aggressive onslaught as the perfect setup for a devastating, unforeseen counterstrike. Then, at 4:15 a.m. local time, the carefully laid plans threatened to unravel with terrifying speed. 4:45 agonizing seconds, a wave of cold dread washed over the Ukrainian command bunker as every screen blazed pure, unadulterated red. The unthinkable was happening. The entire Russian barrage had inexplicably shifted course, now hurtling directly towards the real gas hub. Russia's guidance system, brutally simple in its effectiveness, was designed to lock onto the most intense heat signature available. And at that harrowing moment, despite all efforts, that signature was emanating from the genuine facility. Just as despair threatened to take hold, the true brilliance of the Ukrainian trap sprang. From the fields below, a synchronized ascent of 50 DJI mod quadcopters pierced the pre-dawn gloom. These weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were lures, a digital chorus of deception. Their onboard heat emitters flared to life, instantly creating a thermal signature that was deliberately amplified, stronger, hotter, and utterly irresistible to the incoming missile seekers than the actual gas hub. On the tactical maps, the shift was stark, almost mesmerizing. The entire swarming mass of missiles began a slow, deliberate pivot, their deadly trajectories bending, pulled inexorably off course and redirected towards the magnificent, burning decoy. The lure, a ballet of calculated risk and technological cunning, was working flawlessly until an unexpected adversary joined the fray. The thick, insidious mist, a natural phenomenon, began to fight back. It scattered the DJI mod quadcopter signals just enough, causing 10 of the slower Shahid drones to lose their critical ghost signal, flying blindly through the atmospheric interference. One of these lost drones found itself catastrophically lucky. It clipped a crucial pressure valve on the real pipeline. A sudden, violent fireball erupted, marking a $5 million damage reported later by Naftogaz. Yet, miles away in Belgorod, the Russian commander observed that very fireball on his drone feed, making a fatal, pride-driven assumption. He triumphantly reported a direct hit, convinced beyond doubt that victory was his. To crush any phantom resistance, he issued a chilling order: unleash his most powerful electronic weapon, utterly convinced he was merely mopping up a crippled, defeated target. At 4:17 a.m. local time, the entire battlefield plunged into an unnerving silence. A colossal, $50 million Kasuka 4 jammer roared into devastating life, blanketing a 20-mile radius in an overwhelming wave of pure electronic noise. On the Ukrainian screens, every vital radio link was instantly shredded into static. The video feeds from the invaluable DJI mod quadcopters ripped from the sky as the drones fell, useless, to the earth. To the Russians, the fight was emphatically over. They had won, or so they desperately believed. But this was precisely where Ukraine's ultimate act of battlefield recycling, a secret forged in the crucible of war, came into its own. For months, they had meticulously collected every crashed Russian Shahid drone they could salvage, diligently scavenging the wreckage, reverse engineering their systems, and painstakingly rebuilding them into something the Russians would never, in their wildest nightmares, expect, a weapon pointed directly back at its original masters. These were the fiber phantoms. As the Kasuka jammer unleashed its blinding electronic storm, silencing all conventional radio signals, 20 of these reprogrammed Shahids roared to life. Crucially, they were physically connected by spools of hair-thin fiber optic cable. This was their unbreakable link. You cannot jam a beam of light. Far from blinding the phantoms, the Kasuka jammer had, in an ironic twist of fate, provided them with perfect, unassailable cover, sweeping the sky clean of any potential witnesses. Hugging the terrain at an astonishingly low 30 feet, these phantoms were now a ghost army, streaking silently and completely undetected towards Belgorod. Back in the Russian command post, the commander's face contorted in disbelief. His jammer was operating at peak power, yet the massive, continuous explosions erupting from the decoy site had transformed his radar display into a chaotic, indecipherable mess of false returns. He was blind. He was utterly confused. And, through the pulsing static, a flicker, he thought he saw something still moving. In a surge of raw panic, he barked the only order he had left: fire everything. The S-400 batteries, which had just moments ago believed the fight was concluded, were now forced to frantically reacquire targets in the swirling vortex of a self-inflicted radar storm. At 4:18 a.m. local time, the sky over the decoy site erupted into a scene of pure, self-inflicted chaos. The Russian S-400 batteries, designed for precision, were now frantically launching multi-million-dollar missiles not at a real threat, but at the burning, smoking wreckage of the inflatable ghost they had already so definitively destroyed. The S-400's sophisticated fire control computer, a technological marvel engineered to track 100 targets simultaneously, spiraled into a state of digital schizophrenia. It desperately attempted to assign threat priorities to targets that flickered in and out of existence, some seemingly moving at Mach 6, others drifting erratically like smoke. Every time it painstakingly calculated a firing solution, the target's signature shifted, warped by the intense heat and debris. It was an impossible equation, and the system was solving it by throwing million-dollar tantrums into an empty field. Their state-of-the-art fire control arrays, overwhelmed and overloaded, locked onto the massive heat blooms and the distorted radar returns from the debris cloud. Convinced they were finishing the job, they were systematically wasting multi-million-dollar missiles to pulverize an already destroyed field of burning rubber. But amidst all this self-inflicted confusion, a single, very real threat slipped through the cracks. A lone KH-101 cruise missile, a leaker that had broken free from the initial lure, was now screaming relentlessly towards the actual gas hub. This was the moment for the real defense to kick in, and it was devastatingly effective. 7 miles away, the American gifted NASAMS batteries, with a perfectly clear and unobstructed view, sprang into action. 2 AMRAAM missiles, sleek and swift, leaped from their launchers at Mach 4. They had one pristine, clean target. The KH-101 vanished in a precise, surgical fireball before it could even get close. And this entire, spectacular Russian fireworks show, exploding over an empty field of burning decoys, it was the perfect cover. Flying low and utterly silent beneath the manufactured chaos, the 20 fiber phantoms deftly utilized the rolling hills to mask their final, audacious approach into Belgorod. They were now just 43 seconds from impact. Back in his command post, the Russian commander, still clinging to his delusion, watched his S-400s hitting something. He saw massive secondary explosions lighting up the sky, and he jubilantly reported a resounding success. He had absolutely no idea that the very fireworks he was celebrating were, in fact, precisely masking the approach of the drones that were moments away from wiping his launch site clean off the map. At 4:19 a.m. local time, it was no longer a sophisticated radar system that spotted the existential threat. It was a terrified Russian soldier on the ground in Belgorod. Through a fleeting break in the fog, he saw it. a dark shape, moving impossibly fast and low. Then another, and another. His frantic, stammering shouts into the radio confirmed the impossible, the horrifying truth. The attack wasn't over. It was just beginning. The last line of defense, Russia's formidable panzer missile systems, their point-blank bodyguards, roared to life, firing wildly and indiscriminately into the swirling mist. This should have been a slaughter. With a 12-mile engagement range and missiles capable of swatting jets from the sky, the Panzer was designed for such threats. But the Panzer's brain, its advanced radar, was searching for an electronic ghost. It was designed to lock onto the radio signals and heat signatures of conventional drones. The Fiber Phantoms had neither. To the Panzer's state-of-the-art radar, they were completely, eerily invisible. The Russian commander, his voice cracking with a terrifying blend of rage and disbelief, screamed into the radio, "Manual, override. Fire at anything that moves." Inside the Panzer vehicle, the gunner slammed his hand on the override switch. His optical sights were nearly useless, a blurry, strobing mess of fog and exploding debris. He was reduced to desperately hunting for shadows, attempting to lead a target moving at an astonishing 170 feet per second with a joystick. A futile burst of 30mm cannon fire ripped a line of holes in the dirt 100 yards behind a Phantom that had already deftly changed direction. Every shot was a desperate guess, a prayer launched against the unforgiving laws of physics. It was a gesture of pure, unadulterated desperation. A few Phantoms, a testament to sheer luck amidst the frantic barrage, were indeed destroyed by chance shots. But it was akin to attempting to halt a raging tidal wave with a mere bucket. 14 were still coming, inexorably. The lead Phantom's camera locked onto its ultimate target, and his Condor launch vehicle, its missile tube gaping open as its crew scrambled frantically to reload. 22 seconds to impact. The drone, now shedding its useless fiber optic tether, its warhead armed and ready, plunged towards its destiny. The very ground in Belgorod began to shake, but this time it was not from their own launchers. The Russian commander's hollow victory was about to come crashing down, literally. At 4:20 a.m. local time, the fatal flaw in Russian doctrine, the one Ukraine had gambled everything on, was brutally exposed. A 50-ton Iskander launch vehicle, a mobile fortress designed for overwhelming firepower, was completely helpless for the critical 15 seconds it took to reload a missile. Its crew was exposed. Its volatile fuel was unprotected. It was in essence a sitting duck, and the Fiber Phantoms had just found a flock of them. The first Phantom, with surgical precision, didn't aim for the launcher itself. That would have been inefficient. Instead, it targeted the 1,000-pound hydrazine fuel tanker parked perilously close beside it. The Phantom's 90-pound warhead instantly transformed the tanker into a massive, roiling fireball, and the chain reaction was instantaneous, catastrophic. The second, thunderous explosion wasn't another drone. It was the ammunition on the neighboring launch vehicle, cooking off from the intense, searing heat. This was the precise moment the entire battle flipped on its head. The hunters had become the hunted. The very missiles Russia had launched to cripple Ukraine's gas supply had, in a devastating irony, created the perfect smoke screen for the drones that were now tearing their own base apart. This was the ultimate reversal. Russia was being annihilated by its own reprogrammed weapons, all under the concealing shroud of its own self-inflicted chaos. Back in his command post, the Russian commander's screen, which just moments ago had triumphantly displayed a successful strike in Ukraine, now showed him the live, horrifying feed of his own launch site being systematically dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. His flawless victory had transmuted into a towering column of black smoke, rising ominously from his own backyard. The bait had been taken, the trap had been sprung, and now, the deadly boomerang was undeniably coming home. Phantom number 1 slammed into its target, but its impact was more than a mere explosion. It unleashed a physics lesson from hell. The 90-pound high explosive warhead shrapnel, moving at an astounding 5,000 feet per second, acted like a million tiny, incandescent matches, instantly igniting the 1,000 pounds of volatile hydrazine rocket fuel stored on the vehicle. But the true, horrifying killer was the Monroe effect. In a microsecond, the warhead's copper liner was forged into a needle-thin jet of molten metal, a supersonic scalpel moving at an unthinkable 23,000 feet per second. It punched effortlessly through the tanker's 6 inches of hardened armor as if it were mere cardboard. The subsequent pressure wave from this first kill, a staggering 20,000 psi, violently crumpled the neighboring launch vehicle like a tin can, just moments before its own sympathetic detonation cooked off. And then the next phantom hit, and the next, in a relentless, brutal sequence. In less than 10 seconds, 14 separate strikes transformed a $400 million launch site into a smoldering scrapyard, sending a monstrous 300-foot column of black smoke spiraling into the morning sky. So, what did the battlefield truly look like the morning after Russia launched a $200 million punch, only to largely hit itself? Satellite images, chillingly provided by NASA, told the entire, unvarnished story. In Ukraine, the damage was minimal, a mere $5 million scorch mark on a single compressor. Naftogaz triumphantly reported 95% of its critical capacity still online. There would be no winter blackout, no strategic freeze of a nation. But across the border in Belgorod, the scene was one of unmitigated catastrophe. A $400 million launch site, once a symbol of Russian power, had been reduced to a smoldering, twisted junkyard. Russia had squandered 25 of its 35 prized Iskander missiles and 50 of its 60 drones, all for a solitary, inconsequential glancing blow on an enemy pipeline. This attack was never just about destroying infrastructure. It was a deliberate act of terror, a cold calculus designed to freeze millions of Ukrainian civilians into submission. But the plan backfired with spectacular, devastating force. Not only did Ukraine's vital gas grid hold firm, but the failed assault inadvertently handed them the perfect, long-awaited opportunity to strike back. An eye for an eye, indeed. Ukraine's gas supply preserved for Russia's irreplaceable oil and missiles. The profound loss of the Belgorod launch site immediately created a logistical nightmare for Russia, compelling them to pull their remaining precious Iskanders much deeper into their own vulnerable territory. Of course, the moment the acrid smoke cleared, the predictable propaganda war ignited. Moscow, ever consistent, branded it a technical glitch, the same tired, unconvincing excuse they habitually deployed. Except this time, you couldn't argue with the crystal-clear, irrefutable images of a burning Russian base, splashed across every news channel from CNN to Kyiv. The carefully cultivated myth of an invincible Russian arsenal went up in smoke alongside their base, and the psychological victory for Ukraine was immeasurable. President Zelensky, seizing the moment, rightly declared it a failed act of sabotage, and in a powerful ripple effect, the West responded by unlocking another $500 million in crucial aid. And this brings us to the final, masterful, strategic checkmate. The audacious Ukrainian counterstrike had forced President Putin into an agonizing, nightmare dilemma. Does he prioritize the protection of his high-value launch sites buried deep in the rear, or does he protect his beleaguered troops on the front lines? He cannot, by any stretch of strategic imagination, do both. Every S-400 system he is now compelled to pull back to defend his own vulnerable bases represents another gaping, exposed hole in the sky over the Donbass, another wide-open door for Ukrainian F-16s and devastating ATACMS missiles. This, in essence, is the new doctrine of warfare Ukraine is writing in real time. A low-cost, asymmetric trap that has not only drained Russia's war chest, but has thrown its entire military strategy into an unprecedented state of chaos. The mighty bear, in its arrogance, poked the beehive, and now it is getting stung back, fiercely and relentlessly.